Yeah, on Twitch. Alright, we're live.
Hey everyone.
Hi.
Thank you, Zinnia. Yeah, so today we're going over another game from last week. This was between a couple of about 1,000 rated USCF players. And yeah, we'll just get right into it. So we had a Scandinavian, or a Scandi. This is a huge pet favorite of one of my favorite chess personalities, John Bartholomew. So yeah, if you're interested in learning a lot more about the Scandi, I highly recommend him. He has a few, or at least one course on Chessable, with I think another one coming if it's not out already. And so the Scandinavian is an interesting opening just strategically, because one of the first things that every patzer in chess learns is that you shouldn't develop your queen early. And this kind of flies in the face of all basic chess logic. And so why would black do this? What black is trying to claim, even though they bring out their queen early, which can give white a few quick tempi in the opening, is that black has managed to trade off one of white's central pawns for their own. And even though white will be able to get some space in the center with d4, white's ability to really use that space is not as easy as if they were able to have the ideal pawn center. So the ideal pawn center is when you have pawns on d4 and e4. And in that case, you can grab space with e5 or d5 with the other pawn to help support those pushes. And so with just the one pawn center, white's central space isn't felt quite as much. So white continued knight c3, which is the main move, and in the Scandi, black has many different setups. There's queen a5, queen d8, queen d6, queen e6, queen e5, and they all kind of have their own little nuances. The main moves just being queen going back home and just underdeveloping. And then the other main move is queen a5. So this tries to keep the queen on an active square. White will probably be playing d4, and so should keep the knight pinned once that's the case. Also, the main pawn structure that you see in the Scandinavian comes from putting pawns on c6 and e6. This is also the pawn structure that you'll see a lot of the times in the Caro-Kann. If you can imagine in the Caro-Kann, which comes from playing c6 and d5, once there's a trade on e4, then black can basically set up the same structure. And so the Scandinavian is very, very related to the Caro-Kann. So people who like one can tend to really like the other. They can be pretty positional. But yeah, so with the queen on a5, once black plays c6, oftentimes it'll make a nice little home for the queen on c7. Okay, so knight f3. Normally, white doesn't necessarily want to commit to putting the knight on f3 immediately, just because the bishop can come to g4, but it's really, and then if you play h3, maybe the queen can swing to h4, h5, pinning the pawn to the rook. But it's not really such a big deal and should probably just transpose. Knight f6, d4. Okay, so yeah, we've kind of gone for one of the main setups for white. Bishop f5, trying to get this pawn to e6, but not committing to doing so until we get the bishop outside of the pawn chain. Again, that's like a big. I was saying that this is similar to the Caro-Kann, and again, in French is that we get the bishop outside of the pawn chain before establishing the desirable pawn to e6. So bishop d2, already creating some tension with the queen. There are many tactics that can arise from knight jumps to either d5 or b5 in the future. And yeah, white played e6, and I already think that this is kind of flirting with potential disaster. Like, it's not necessarily losing or anything immediately, but I think c6 should be almost automatic. Like, bishop d2 comes. You don't have to immediately get your queen out of the potential discoveries of the knight, but you should be opening up this retreat square like immediately, so that any knight jumps, the queen should be very comfortable and able, either being able to go to c7, or if, for example, knight b5, the queen can go back to d8. Obviously, c7 would be controlled by the knight in the case of knight b5. And if we go c6, then after like bishop c4, e6, knight d5, for example, and the queen is able to retreat all the way back to c7, and there's no tactics happening on c7. Yeah, so this could be a good way for white to continue. Yeah, so after black did play e6, I think white was slightly inaccurate themselves. They played this move a4. And I'm not entirely sure what the point of a4 is. I mean, it does help prop up knight b5, but the bishop was already controlling that square. The only point I can maybe see behind a4 is that potentially if we get knight b5 in and there's like maybe queen b6, that we can get a5 in. But I think white maybe had more productive ways to improve the position. So I think one good way that white could have played is either just developing with like bishop e2, or get this knight to e5. So one of the main benefits of having space, and you'll often see this when you have this kind of central d4 square, is that it creates a very nice outpost for the knight on e5. And in this particular case, it has a kind of concrete benefit. So the natural move from black would be to just challenge that knight and develop with knight b7. But then knight c4 comes, and this is actually very uncomfortable for black. The queen, because black never played c6, the queen doesn't really have many great squares. Like, the most natural square for the queen to go to would be to play queen b4, but it actually just runs into a pretty big tactical shot with knight d5. The bishop hits the queen, and the computer's already just suggesting that like black just should give up the queen for two pieces. But this is really bad. The knight's hitting c7. The queen has no way to actually defend c7. The queen b6 is covered. Queen d6 is covered by the knight at c4. So yeah, this would be a disaster. So because of that, black would have to play queen e6. It's really the only safe square. But the queen is like kind of awkwardly placed here. Like, first of all, it is stepping right into the discovery of the bishop. And while there isn't a good discovery, the queen is just really on the edge of the board, not doing anything productive. And white can play queen f3, which has benefits of helping control potential d5 push, putting pressure on b7, and one sample one. Yeah, this is a very pretty shot. The bishop indirectly defends the knight because if takes, there's this discovered check, and the queen would drop. Yeah, black's pieces do not look coordinated here. White will finish development, and just have like a pretty pleasant game while this queen is kind of offside. So yeah, that would be if knight e5 instead of in the game continuation a4. But okay, a4, knight c6, and yeah, already we're getting this knight b5 idea, and now we do kind of see the point of why a4 is useful, because of queen b6, a5, and yeah, like black has to give up the knight just to basically not lose, and yeah, I think black kind of panicked here. It is very scary. It does seem like black is just losing material here, and play this move bishop b4. But this is just immediately losing. And the only way for black to stay in the game here was knight b4. And the point is that white would like to be able to play c3 to kick the knight away, but we just don't have time. c3 and then knight c2, coordinating with the bishop, and there's this fork on a1 and e1. And so the point is that during the game, instead of knight b4, bishop b4 was played to block, but this doesn't come with a threat, right? There's no threat on c2, and so c3 is able to be played, and if the bishop just backs up, then we can start expanding, and you can't go queen a6, because then knight c7 is a fork, right? And if you go queen b6, then we have a5, which is kind of the point of white's a4 idea. But yeah, black was a little bit cooperative by playing knight c6 and then bishop e4. So in any case, black didn't play, I think, the most natural bishop e7, but both would have been losing. So the point is that takes comes with tempo on the queen. Black doesn't have time to take the knight in response. A little bit of a deflection. Black can take, but then white would take back and just emerge with 3 pieces to black's 2 pieces. And white should be able to just develop, get king castled, and slowly convert this winning position. But yeah, black just sort of ended up losing all the material. Heads up move from white. Desperado, taking the knight on c2 because black's own queen was hanging as well. King b2, bishop e3, bishop d3, rook h c1, and yeah, white is up a piece and a rook. This is +8 material for white. And black can't even get any activity. White's able to challenge the c-file. And so black, pretty justifiably, I think even at a 1,000 rating, resigned here. There's just no ideas to even drum up any kind of practical play. So yeah, I think the main lesson here for black would have been to play the c6 move to create some retreat squares for the queen. And for white, I think they played it extremely well. This a4 move maybe wasn't the most consistent, and they could have put the pieces on slightly better squares with like knight e5. But overall, really nice game from white. So yeah, that was the game of the week. Now I also want to go over my game last week. So I was playing Megan, who we've played each other. She's probably the opponent that I played the most in my time here at the Chicago Chess Center. Both pretty regulars in these Monday Opens, and we keep having this Benoni. We've had a Benoni opening many times, and so it's been turning into this sort of theoretical battle. And so I've had pretty decent results against the Benoni, just in general. And I feel like
Megan has a Twitch, right?
Is she on Twitch right now?
Yeah, she might see this video.
Oh.
It'd be funny.
Hey Megan, if you're watching. And I feel like I understand the structures pretty well. Black gives white a lot of space, but goes for a lot of counterplay, especially on the queen side. But yeah, I may have to think about switching up my openings in the future, because we've had very similar games a few times, and I'll kind of point out, where we've sort of deviated in the past. So yeah, this is what I was talking about. White gains space in the center with this move d5, takes, d6, knight c3, g6. So that's kind of the point of c5. Black carves out by forcing d5, makes the scope of this dark square bishop that much stronger. So yeah, black gets the bishop to the long diagonal. White goes for this. If you've never seen this move, it's perhaps surprising. It looks awkward, you block in the bishop. But the point is that white wants to play e4, but white is the one who has space. And usually when you lack space, you want to trade off pieces. And so white could play e4, this is totally legitimate, but then it allows bishop g4, which will guarantee the trade of at least one piece. And so knight d2 is a little bit more ambitious, trying to keep as many pieces on the board as possible. So bishop g7, e4, castles, bishop e2, rook e8, this is all very standard. Castles, yeah, knight a6. So yeah, Megan likes to go for these. So there's two main ideas that black can basically play for. It's either to go for like a6, b5 with knight b7, or black can play for knight a6 and knight c7. Knight a6 does get in the way of a6, at least temporarily. And so, yeah, these are basically just the two main ways that black can play. Knight a6, definitely one of black's stronger ideas. F3, just, there's some pressure on e4 and freeing up my knight to potentially leave, so that's not tied down to e4. Knight c7, a4. So black's main idea for counterplay is to somehow get this move b5 in. So a4 helps bring b5 under control. b6. So one of the ideas of knight c7 is that the knight is able to help contribute to developing bishop a6. And if you look at along this diagonal, the bishop really doesn't have many good squares. It is possible to play bishop d7 in some lines, trying to help gear up for b5. But like I was saying before, black wants to trade off pieces, and by developing to this f1 e6 diagonal is guaranteed to trade off one piece. But black has had to use a lot of time to get that in. Knight a6, knight c7, b6, bishop e6, and then here a trade. Right? This is a lot of moves just to get one trade of pieces in. So that's sort of the downside to this plan from black. And if I just back up a little bit, Megan and I have had this position, I think, like 5 times or at least 4 times, if I think we've had one game that went bishop f4, maybe 2 games that went bishop g5, and then this game and the game before this, I tried this rook b1 idea. And the idea behind rook b1 is we get the rook off of any potential threats from the bishop on this diagonal, and it also helps to prepare a pretty thematic break in the center, not the center, on the queen side with b4, which you'll see in many different openings. Like I can even think of in the Grand Prix from the black side, you'll also play like rook b8 and b5. It's the exact same idea. So it is thematic across a lot of different openings. And so trade, knight d7. The point is that the knight reroutes potentially to e5, but also opens up the bishop so that it temporarily prevents b4 because the knight would hang, which is why bishop d2 defends the knight. And in our game last time, Megan went for this plan, creating this battery. Again, just trying to prevent b4 as much as possible. But in that game, the queen ended up kind of trapped on h8 just to make room for the bishop to retreat again, and it became very awkward for the queen. So in this game, correctly, she played a6, just trying to gear up for b5, which is black's main idea. I get my break-in, b4, and yeah, I played queen e2, which is pretty natural, putting some pressure on e6, also helping to prevent b5 as much as possible. One interesting alternative that I had during the game that I was considering is to play b5. And the point is that after takes, let's say takes, yes, black does get this pass c pawn, but actually because of white's grip on the white squares, it becomes very difficult for black to ever really push the c pawn. And so black's counterplay on the queen side is kind of dead. And now that it's been kind of killed off, now white can sort of long-term refocus their energies now that they've done a lot of prophylaxis against black's plans, can start thinking about playing on the king side and in the center. So this would have been an interesting way to play. But instead during the game I decided on queen e2. And yeah, b5 was, of course this is the thematic break for black, but it basically just it sacrifices a pawn. The only way it wouldn't sacrifice a pawn is if after takes, if Megan had given up her dark squared bishop. But after takes, and let's say here, after queen e2, this gets very scary for black with all the weaknesses around black's dark squares, and yeah, she had spent a lot of time thinking about playing b5, and I think this was her intention, but kind of had second thoughts. On this during the game, but yeah, if you're not going to take the knight on c3, then I actually just end up winning a pawn. Note that I have to play knight takes b5 here. If you try and play bishop takes b5, you actually just lose on the spot, because bishop takes c3, bishop removing a defender of the bishop, so now there's 2 attackers and only my queen is defending. And if you try to take the knight intermezzo, the bishop backs up with check, and black just emerges up a piece. So it's very important that you take with the knight on b5. And after, knight b6, which I was actually pretty happy to see. I mean, it comes with tempo on the bishop, but could have also gotten tempo on the bishop with knight e5. But there are lines where maybe the queen wants to come to b6 for a potential check on the king on g1. So yeah, the knight taking away that square, I was happy to see. I went for kind of the simple option with b takes c5, allowing black to grab my leg square bishop, but since I'm up a pawn, I'm not so concerned about maintaining the bishop pair. I kind of just want to simplify and create like a very nice protected pass pawn with my d5 pawn. I did sort of miss, there's a very thematic, you see this in the King's Indian as well sometimes, this knight a7, knight c6 maneuver with threats on the fork on the b8 rook and the queen. So I did kind of forget about this idea during the game, but okay, b takes c5. I think it's still very good. Takes. You just have a huge series of trades. Takes here, check, and black wins back one of their pawns, but white is still up a pawn. I actually thought during the game that bishop takes c5 would have been slightly more resilient. It is very scary to play this move because you are conceding this diagonal to white, and with queens on the board, it is very possible that black could just get checkmated. The problem is that it's sort of like the lesser evil, because after takes, this is a protected pass pawn, and it's only a few steps away from promotion, and it becomes just very scary very quickly for black. So I think this next move is probably my one big sort of conceptual error during the game. I try to be very concrete, and this is a problem that when you consider like top players versus patsers such as myself, is that us patsers like to find concrete solutions. We don't like to just sit on a position and say that we're better. We try to sort of win as quickly as possible. But patience is often when you're just dominating a position, as white is here, just slow improving moves and realizing that black is not in time to do anything really. So white should just play rook b1, take total control over the b file, and white can improve from here. And there's just nothing really black has no counterplay. But instead, I played the very forcing variation. The point is that the queen puts pressure on the rook on e8, so the black's queen is very, very tied down. There's only so many squares that she can go to. And really the only square that ends up making sense, and the engine ends up agreeing, and I knew this during the game, is that queen b8. And like for example, if queen a8, then I go rook b1, and black again is just completely stuck, and with the bishop controlling d8, this pawn is like quickly going to promote. Like the rook can never challenge me on the b file, and this would be just dead lost for black. So queen b8 takes, and bishop c7. And I had calculated all this during the game, but this was really the one chance I let for my opponent to kind of save the game. And white would still be better here, but only slightly. And with best defense, black should be able to hold. And it's somewhat unintuitive, but sorry, where's go ahead and show this? Yeah, rook b3 here. It's somewhat unintuitive, but once you see it, it actually makes a lot of sense. So, the point of me playing bishop c7, I was trying to hit the rook with tempo, and like the bishop here is in a perfect spot to help escort the pawn up the board to this promotion square on d8. But after rook b3, say d6, rook d3. And the rook here is actually perfectly placed. Rooks belong behind passed pawns. This is both true if you're trying to promote, and also true if you're trying to stop your opponent's pawn. And yeah, the bishop will come to f6, help control d8, and yeah, black has a passed pawn of their own, which they can start creating their own counterplay. Like my counterplay is kind of stopped with this rook on d3. So yeah, very fortunate that my opponent didn't spot this and instead played the more natural but much more passive, and I knew that rook c8 would just be losing, and this is what I calculated when I played bishop a5. When I played this move, bishop a5 earlier. So now I play d6, and if black doesn't act now, I'm already threatening to play d7, where I wouldn't be worried about my bishop hanging because I'd then promote. So bishop e6, not e6, f6, rook c1, trying to win my second pawn. King f8, and now a kind of nice move, e5. The point is that the bishop is tied down to this d8 square. Otherwise, I'm just trying to play d7, d8, and I can kind of keep playing this tactic. So if say bishop g5, then I can play f4, and here, then here. Eventually, the bishop has to play to d8. If after bishop f4 you try to take, saying, haha, I have tempo on your rook, I can just ignore it because, promotion is, above everything. And they can try to sidestep the threat of d7 on the rook. But once I get my rook to d1, this pawn will promote, and that's pretty much game over. So, because of that, Megan played bishop d8, but now I'm able to trade and enter into this rook and pawn endgame where I have the two extra connected pawns with this connected pass pawn, which is just completely winning. And so from here, it's a bit of just technique. King 8, rook c7, cutting the king off along the 7th rank. h5, king g1, trying to bring my king to the game. And yeah, Megan's main idea is to try to split up my pawns. So in this position, she would like to play f6, trying to break up these pawns. If this pawn takes, for example, then she can take on d6. But if f6, then I can just play f4, reinforcing my pawn chain. So she starts with g5, trying to get ahead of that, stopping me from playing f4 myself. But I try to carve out this f4 square with h4. I don't mind her taking because then her pawns will be weak and I can scoop them up, which she does. I play rook c4. Now she goes for her f6 plan. But now I can just simplify, and we end up just in this very clean position where I have the two connected passed pawns, and rook versus rook, which is just a theoretical win. And it's even winning in the more difficult case is when, say this f pawn was actually on the h file instead. Like if you have the two pawns on the edge of the board, that's slightly more difficult. With the pawns in the center, this is even easier. and it's just about making slow improvements. And actually, what's funny is that, so going back to what I was just saying, actually, with the pawns on the edge of the board, like this, literally that day or the day beforehand in the U.S. Chess Championships, Hans Niemann had that endgame against Mishra, and demonstrated pretty well how to win that. Like in that example, there's some tactics where you have to be ready to underpromote, and Hans was even demonstrating that he knew that by grabbing a knight and bishop off the side of the board, kind of signaling to Mishra, okay, I know how to win this. Please resign. But actually, Mishra played it out to checkmate, which was funny. But okay, so king h2, f4, defending my rook, and yeah, you just slowly inch your way up the board, push their king back, and keep pushing them back until, yeah, this is, when I play rook a7 check, either she would have to go to the back rank, in which case her king is completely inactive, or as in the game, she steps up the board. I calculated the sequence where actually her king just gets cut off. And this is a nice technique to know, just in general. You want to cut their king off, so now her king can't even assist in trying to defend the promotion squares. It's like an invisible barrier that this rook has created along the e file. And so once the king is cut off, it makes my life a lot easier. And so, yeah, she can give some checks. Of course, she doesn't want to trade. And I just bring my king up the board. And at this point, where I move 60, I don't think either of us really wanted to deal with getting on their score sheet. And so she resigned. And so, yeah, that was my game from last week. And so now we'll enter the last round of the tournament. So yeah, it'll be exciting to see how the rest of the tournament shakes out. So